Hey folks, Nick here from Another BookTube channel, and today, continuing the Swamp Thing read-along with Swamp Thing number 38. I don't know if it's maybe just because I'm not feeling well today, maybe I just wasn't in the mood, but I didn't get anything out of this comic. This is the first one in the Alan Moore run that I have finished. I've read it twice, and I'm kind of coming up empty on stuff to talk about in regards to it. But we'll go through it nonetheless. We'll go through the story at least. But I don't. There's like some kind of secret sauce, some kind of secret ingredient that is missing here, and I wonder. I mean, maybe it's because it's not the usual artists. Stephen Bissett and Rick Veitch are both not on here. It's Stan Woch filling in. But there's just something about this comic that's just kind of meh, you know? The cover is by Bissett and Totleben. It's not their finest, composition. It's good, but it's definitely not my favorite. And I think it's pretty forgettable, honestly. And when we get to the interiors, we'll see throughout here. I'm not overly impressed with a lot of these compositions and layouts, especially because we're coming off of the great issue by Rick Veitch, Growth Patterns, which was really creative in its layouts. Rick Veitch and Stephen Bissett are known for their experimental compositions and just ability to make the page interesting. Stan Woch or Watch or whatever his name is, however it's pronounced, he's not a bad artist, but doesn't have that magic that Bissett and Veitch do. So we start here with Swamp Thing and Abby, who are a bit melancholy because in the previous issue, which if you haven't watched the previous episode or read that issue, go back, please do it so you have the context. Or better yet, start this read along from the beginning so you have all of the information you need. But they're melancholy because John Constantine showed up last issue in his first appearance and kind of dropped a bomb and let them know that something really big is brewing in the world, like something like magical and mystical is coming to fruition. We've got like less than a year left. Swamp Thing is going to be critical in, saving the world or stopping that. But to do so, he needs to learn more about himself first and his full powers. And to do that, you need me. So I'm going to go to Rosewood, Illinois, because there's something going on there. Swamp Thing, meet me there. And so Swamp Thing is going to meet Constantine. He's resolved to go do that. And this has messed up Abby's honeymoon plans, essentially. She wants as normal a life as possible, as you can have with a swamp monster for a husband. She just wants to, the craziness to end. And she's not getting that. So she's a little glum. And while they're saying their goodbyes, because Swamp Thing's going to leave his body behind in Louisiana, send his consciousness through the green, and reemerge in Rosewood, Illinois, and reform his body there, because he learned he can do that from Constantine. And while they're having this little goodbye, we get these boys who are just having some fun, going to swim at the local watering hole. And they're splashing around, having a good time, and they're in, as we see the sign here, Rosewood, Illinois. And as Swamp Thing lies down to begin his travels, we get that classic kind of Jaws camera angle or Creature from the Black Lagoon of something under the water looking up at these boys. That's some danger in the water. And if you watched my book review for the Darcy Coates book From Below, you know how I feel about the water. I don't mess around with it. So these boys, something's looking at them from below, and we get probably like the most interesting panel sequence in this issue, where the boys realize that there's leeches in the water, and they got leeches all over them, and so they start panicking and freaking out and running to shore, except for this one boy in the foreground called Nicky, and he's floating there stock still, but his color is fading, it becomes yellow, and then it's pure white all the way at the end. And the boys realize something's wrong, and we can see him just completely drained of color. and they don't know what's going on. But we find out on the page turn, we see some punk vampires swimming under the water. They got mohawks. They got an iron cross tattooed on their head. These are bad dudes. Name of the issue is Still Waters, written by Alan Moore, art by Stan Woch and John Totleben. This is a nice page. I think John Tottleben's inks really do a lot of work when these guest artists come in, because his inking style creates that sense of unity from issue to issue. So even though it's not Bissett putting down the pencils, this still feels very much like a page that belongs in Swamp Thing, because of his inking style. It just works really well. I think these like little bubbles, these very, very tiny ones that might not even be showing up on camera, I think those might be like maybe like little whiteout dots that are getting colored in green. And the boys start freaking out. One of them notices shadows under the water beneath Nikki, and they're saying, "We got to go help him. We got to get him." But the other boys are, absolutely not. We're not going back in those waters. There's leeches in there. Let's go get like an adult. Let's go find someone who can help him. And they say, "Nikki, we'll be right back. Just hang in there." Yeah, he'll hang in there. He'll be just fine, guys. You're doing a great job. And our aquatic vampires dive deeper into the abyss, and rather than diving into nothingness, they've got a whole town that they are visiting. There is what it turns out that Rosewood, Illinois, is a sunken town beneath the water. An entire main street here. What happened? How is this? How is this possible? And we find out on this page. Our memory is refreshed. So on this page, Swamp Thing is swimming through the green as these vampires are swimming through the town of Rosewood. And he's recollecting that the reason Rosewood sounded familiar to him was that back when he still thought he was Alec Holland, he visited Rosewood once before. And it was a town overrun by vampires. And the way that it was resolved, the issue was resolved, was a dam that was protecting the town was destroyed. I don't know if it was Swamp Thing specifically who did it, but somebody who was trying to, end the threat, destroyed the dam, and it washed away all the vampires, killed them all, or so they thought. Alan Moore, this happened in Saga of the Swamp Thing #3 for those playing at home. If you have the Bronze Age Omnibus or any of the old issues, that's the one you could find this original story in, by Martin Pascoe and art by Tom Yates, I believe. And so Swamp Thing tells us that little history in case we haven't read that issue, which we probably haven't. And he's swimming through the green looking for Rosewood, finds this little seed that he can drop his consciousness in, and then he just makes himself grow from the surface. We're back with Abby, who is riddled with concern over Swamp Thing. She misses him. She wants him back. She doesn't trust Constantine, and she's at Elysium Lawns, and her coworker can sense that there's something wrong, and we get a really insensitive dialogue from this coworker, and I know why Alan Moore does it, because he's being punny, because he likes to do that, but it's like a really rude thing to say, because the coworker says, "Abby, sooner or later, you're going to have to face facts. Your husband is a vegetable." And Abby's like, "What? A vegetable? What do you mean?" And the coworker says, "Well, your husband, Matt, he's in the hospital. He's a vegetable." Because technically that's true. Both of Abby's husbands are vegetables in a way. Matt is in a vegetative state, in a coma, not likely to recover, and Swamp Thing is an actual plant monster. I also love this little Swamp Thing here. He's just a little chubby guy. Just a little tiny chubby guy. He's so cute. But yeah, like what if your coworker was like, "Oh, you know what? Get over your husband. He's a vegetable." Like, what a terrible thing to say to someone. And we go here now to Constantine at a bar. But before we get to that, I just want to take a look at this house ad really quickly for the Red Tornado miniseries. I haven't read this, but I really like this ad, and I'm trying to figure out who drew it. The marks look like Walt Simonson to me. Like the way that the mouth is drawn, the shading under the chin, under the nose, the eyes, the marks on the boots, and the thin to thick on the calf muscle, very much is Walt Simonson to me. But there's no signature on it, and I couldn't find anything on Google. So if you know by chance who drew this house ad, please let me know. I'm pretty sure it's very Simonson-esque to me. But anyway, back to the story. John Constantine's at a bar, and he has just found out that his friend Emma is dead. We saw that in the previous issue. She was chased out of her apartment window by a nightmare that she painted. It was ruled a suicide. Constantine knows that that's bollocks. And he's, drowning his sorrows in alcohol, as he does. And this rough and tumble guy doesn't know who he's dealing with, calls John a Fruit Loop. Don't want to do that. John whirls around, and even though he's a lot shorter than the guy and a lot leaner, gives him the eye, gives him the stare. Like, you don't mess with a guy that looks like this at you. He is ready to absolutely commit homicide. And we see he's picked up his glass, shattered it in his hands, and now he's just dripping blood. The guy gets the message, says, you know what, never mind, I thought you were somebody else. He orders a beer for John. And we get some interesting panel composition here where in these irises, we get the blood dripping down from John's hand as the boys from Rosewood are trying to figure out what to do. Now, one of them in yellow, Leon, wants to go back and help Nikki. And he says, something was under the water. We got to go back and rescue him, do something. The other boys are like, hell no. We weren't even supposed to be swimming there. We're going to get in big trouble for this. And they're just rationalizing, trying to avoid having to go back. And they eventually say, you know what? He's probably pulling a prank on us. He's probably home already. Let's just get out of here. There's nothing for us to do. Leon's not buying it. They try to bully him into it, into just going along with them, but he doesn't want to do it. So they leave. Leon stays behind. Meanwhile, our vampires are still swimming through the flooded town of Rosewood, and they grab this wedding veil off a mannequin, and they're bringing it to a character they call the Mother. And I will go ahead and I'm going to read out Alan Moore's narration here, because I like to do that. And I think this is probably one of the better written pages in this issue. Slime decorates her bridal veil, rotted artificial flowers clinging to the fish-eaten gauze. Decomposed and delicate, we carry it to the chambers where she waits for us. Waits for us in the dark, swollen, naked, white, heavy with roe. Gross, by the way. Her time is almost come, and she is suffused with a terrible beauty. Once, back in the half-life that she endured while living in the dry lands, her name was Charlene. She worked in a supermarket and worried about her pimples, and knew that no man would ever want her. Now, the unfulfilled aching has gone. She isn't Charlene anymore. She waits, pale and magnificent, in the heavy darkness, for the embrace of her first lover. We call her the Mother, too massive to hunt, too cumbersome to feed. She hungers while our veins throb with purloined crimson. With nails like pearl switchblades, we open our palms, letting her drink deep. She feeds for many. Behind, her bridal train hangs bent and twisted in the filthy waters. Gently we guide her out through lampless passageways, out to meet ecstasy, to meet death. So, this woman's full of eggs, which is pretty nasty, and they are bringing her to meet her lover, as was explained there. And Swamp Thing finally emerges in Rosewood. I like these panels of Swamp Thing. I think this panel goes pretty hard. I like that image quite a bit. And after he emerges, he walks over to the shoreline of the water, and there's Constantine waiting for him. And here Constantine is telling Swamp Thing what he knows. He knows Swamp Thing's been here before. He knows about the town of Rosewood and what happened here. And Swamp Thing says, well, if you know what happened here, you know that there can't be any danger. We flooded the town. They're dead. John says, well, what about those vampires that were trapped in an airtight freezer in the supermarket. All right, yeah, why not? What about them? So Alan Moore is writing them into existence to explain how we got these aquatic vampires, and uh, that explains how these guys got to be where they are. And they really like it underwater because they don't need to breathe, and there's no sunlight because they're deep enough where the sun doesn't reach them, and so there's no angry villagers to be chasing them. They can go out, roam or swim around during the day, and then hunt at night if they need to go on land. So it's really a cushy setup for them, and they can grow their numbers, and that's really the crux here, is that they want to grow their numbers. And we got Leon, who's back at the swimming hole, and hey, look, Nikki's walking around. Maybe he's okay. Maybe he's doing all right, or maybe not. Maybe Nikki is now a member of the undead, and he's going to drag Leon into the water to meet his new friends, the aquatic vampires. So things don't go so well for Leon. And meanwhile, the mother is meeting her lover, and they embrace, and we mercifully, we don't see their consummation. It's not going to be as beautiful as the Rite of Spring issue that we saw earlier. But it is described a little bit, and Swamp Thing is now frustrated because he tells John, hey, you said you had knowledge about myself. That's why I'm here. You need to tell me about me and stop messing around. And Constantine doesn't blush, says, take care of business here first, fix this problem, and then we'll talk. Because there's no cooler guy in the face of danger to himself than John Constantine. He will look literally the devil in the face and not blink as he cons him into doing something that benefits him. He's such a great character. I love the Hellblazer series too, if you've never read that. Swamp Thing has to basically acquiesce here, and he lets Constantine go as the disgusting eggs are hatching. Swamp Thing releases him, walks into the water until he's fully submerged, and we end with John saying, there, now we're both in over our heads. Next up, Fish Story in the next issue. And the letters columns, this is regarding Swamp Thing number 32, which is the Pog issue. Now, if you watched my episode on that, you know that I'm pretty lukewarm on that issue. It doesn't appeal to me a ton, even with the historical context of Walt Kelly's Pogo. It's not my favorite issue. And I was curious what the readers' reaction were to that issue. And at least from what they published here, overwhelmingly glowing. Multiple people saying that they cried reading it. Just absolute love fest for Pog. One person even wrote their entire letter in that portmanteau speak from the issue. So it really resonated with people. I wish it resonated with me a little bit more. Maybe it will as I get older and I keep revisiting it. We'll see. But that's issue 32. We just looked at issue 38. And like I said, just okay for me. Didn't really stand out. Wasn't overly impressed with it. Let me know what your thoughts on this issue are in the comments below. Thank you for spending some time with me today. But now it's time to get back to reading.